guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Val and welcome to today's video, which is actually day 7 of our 200 days of Psalms. And in today's video, which is actually Psalms chapter 7, we see David praise God because of delivering him from his enemies, and it also shows us the confidence that he had in God's deliverance from his enemies. And so yeah, let's get into it. It begins off by first telling God that his trust was in him, and he was under attack because he was being persecuted by his enemies, and despite everything that he was going through, he just knew that God would actually deliver him. See, David referred to God as a deliverer, and because he referred to God in a deliverer dimension, he was either like, if you help me, God, it's okay, but if you help me out of this trial, it's okay, but if you help me walk through it, I still trust you. And we also saw in 1 Corinthians, it should be 9:12, where Paul had a thorn in his flesh, and he cried to God 3 times that he may take that thorn away from him. But God told him that you're made strong in your weakness, and God actually told him that he won't take the thorn out of his life. He will just help him walk through it. Sometimes God delivering us from some things that are thorns in our lives, it's through walking with us. He doesn't have to deliver, he just needs to multiply our grace. In verse 3, we see that David didn't see himself as sinless or perfect, because he talks about, if there is any iniquity in my hands, let my enemies pursue me or overtake me. He didn't see himself as too righteous in the eyes of God. David also knew that God could get angry. In verse 6 we see that, but he knew God could get angry not against him but for him, like he would fight for him because of the anger. I don't think David was actually selfish by saying that. I just do believe that he knew God as a protector, and that God would actually vindicate him, and he knew God was always for him and not against him. We also see David express the dimension of God as a judge, because he says, judge me, O God, according to my integrity and according to my righteousness. I do believe this just expresses the heart of David, because as he's telling God, judge me justly, like he knows God as a just God. He didn't want to be a favorite. He didn't want favorism in God's eyes. He wanted to be judged according to his ways, according to his morals. We see that David desired to always be okay with God, because it says, let the wickedness of the wicked come to an end and the justice of the just be established. As much as we always see that David was always right with God, he knew that for God to do some things, or to save you, or to be a deliverer, that you have to be, there are things that you need to do, and in this case was to be actually upright in heart with God. And David always told God, search my heart, oh God. So we can't really refer to David as a favorite of God. God really doesn't have favorites. He just has standards that he goes by, and because David was meeting these standards by always desiring to walk in righteousness and always desiring to be upright with God, by always telling God to search his heart, that is why God would always deliver him, and that is why he knew God as a just God, and that is why he knew God as a deliverer in his life. And in verse 11 it talks about God is a just God, and it talks about where God is always angry with the unrighteous every day. And just in conclusion, we see that David ended up by praising. In this psalm, it just ends by David praising God because of his righteousness. And back to, it should be Psalms chapter 5, where it talks about David never worshipped God in his emotions or his feelings. He always praised God even before he received his victory, before he received his deliverance, because he knew his God. We need to get to a point where we know God as a just God, as a deliverer. And because God is just, there's principles that we need to follow before we see his vindication, before we see this victory. David didn't just receive victory because he was crying unto God, because he walked in righteousness, and because he always wanted to be right with God in terms of his heart. He always told God, search my heart. Prayer is that we may get to a point where we are crying to God to search our hearts, that we may be right with God all the time, and with that we will always receive victory and vindication. And so yeah, that's all I had for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you tomorrow, and bye.